We are talking today with Bill Gabriel of Barrington, Illinois, and I got that right?
Yes, you did.
Barrington, Illinois, yes. And the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project, recording this interview at the Milwaukee Irish Festival 2019. And this interview is a joint production of the Irish Festival and the GVSU Veterans History Project. Okay, so Bill, start us off with some background on yourself. And to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and my dad at the time was working with my grandfather on my mother's side and putting together some of the motels up there, and he was rather well-to-do, had a bunch of farms, and ultimately he lost them all in the Great Depression. And ultimately, we moved off. My dad got a deferment by working for Bethlehem Steel on submarines. And so we went out to California and lived in California, and he commuted with my uncle to down to the naval base every day and put the submarines back together again after they'd been discharged.
All right. So the part about losing the farms and all the rest of that was all before you were born?
That was
Yeah, because what year were you born?
42.
Yeah.
1942.
Okay. All right. So how old was your father when you were born?
Dad was 20, I'm going to say 27.
Okay. All right. So he was still young enough. He could have been drafted if he were not involved in the war industry.
Yes.
Like he was like that. Okay. So where did you actually grow up?
Well, Minnesota and California and Chicago. So with short time in Minnesota, then a couple of years out in California, and then the rest of the time Chicago.
Okay. So after the war, your family moved to Chicago, or did you go to Chicago even before that?
Chicago before that.
Okay. All right. And let's see, did you finish high school?
No, I didn't, as a matter of fact. I decided high school was stupid and worthless, and I was going to do better things, and so I decided that I would go off into the military. So it made more sense to me at the time.
Okay. And how old were you when you...
17.
Okay. Now, to enlist at 17, you have to have your parents' permission normally.
I did, and I had enough fracas going at home since obviously everybody wanted me to finish high school, and I said, this is bullshit, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were happy to sign up.
Okay. So
And I was happy to leave.
All right. And which branch of the service did you choose?
Army.
Okay.
And I chose Army because it was a 3-year stint. Everybody else was a 4-year stint.
All right. So you didn't have any other inclination beyond that at that point?
Well, yeah, I did too. I thought that I would like something sophisticated and technical because I seem to have some technical kind of skills, and so ground air missiles seems like that was one of the coolest things that you could do.
Where we were before we had our technical difficulties, basically you were talking about the decision to go and join the Army. So basically you went to an Army recruiter and they were telling you about all the wonderful things you could do?
Well, yeah, I actually went to everybody, Navy and Marines and Air Force and Army, and determined at that point that it was a 3-year stint as opposed to a 4-year stint. And the GI Bill sounded like a really pretty interesting thing. And ultimately, I did use the GI Bill. It helped me. I got a GED because I wised up real quick when I was in there and decided I wanted to not just be cannon fodder or be a grunt, and so I needed to get an education, and the GI Bill was going to be helpful in that. And so I also thought it would be very interesting to get a really cool technical thing under my belt, and ground air missiles seemed like the most sophisticated, coolest thing going. So, and then I went in part of the deal too on the buddy plan. So a couple of guys went in with me.
All right.
Had similar interests.
Okay. So when do you actually join the Army?
September of 1959.
Okay. And where do you go for basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Okay. Now, can you describe that place?
Well, it was, you think about Missouri and it being warm, but understand it was an 8-week stint, and this was going into winter after, and God, it was cold, and it was miserable, and there was forced marches, and there was lots of tough athletic kinds of things that you had to go through because they were, preparing you to go off and, to war, basically.
Okay. When you first arrived at Fort Leonard Wood, what kind of treatment did you get?
It was terrible. It was terrible. You were treated like another grunt, and it was just all around terrible.
Okay. What did they do with you by way of processing? When you first arrive at the base, what happens to you?
Well, you get a haircut, and you get issued your military stuff, your bedding and your uniforms, and you start getting your indoctrination about this is where you're going to be staying, and this is where you're going to be eating, and this is here's your commander and platoon leader and all of that.
Okay. Now, these days, very few people will go into the service at all, and so they don't have an idea really even of what basic training consists of. So once you're processed and oriented, what does the actual training involve?
Well, this was Army, and everybody got infantry training. So, regardless of the fact that ground air missiles was artillery, ultimately, you still got infantry training. So you had to learn M1A1 was what I became expert with, and then also a carbine. So both of those, and then you learn dealing with tear gas and throwing grenades and all of that sort of thing.
Okay. Was there a lot of drill and discipline?
There was a tremendous amount.
Okay. And physical training, how much of that or what kinds of things did you do?
You had to run. We worked up to where we were doing a 25-mile forced march with full combat gear, and some of the guys had, in fact, me, would pour blood out of your boots when you were done with that thing, and everybody had huge blisters, and me included, and one of the motivations that you got to not go into sick bay is if you were in sick bay and you were there for 2 days because the doctors discovered that you really had a problem, then you had to repeat basic training.
The whole thing?
The whole thing. So actually we were out and sleeping in this gosh awful cold and on maneuvers, and one of the guys, because he simply would not go back in, ended up dying. It was bad.
Mm-hmm. All right. Were you in good physical shape when you went in?
I was in a hell of a lot better. Yes, I was in good physical shape when I went in, but I was in a lot better physical shape when I came out.
All right. And how did the drill instructors or sergeants, how did they kind of impose discipline, or what did they do to make everybody conform?
Well, you were dirt. You were basically dirt to these guys, and and they were classic drill instructors. They're hard asses, and especially the marches. We did an awful lot of marches, and then calisthenics, and they were in superb physical condition. And for every two-handed push-up you could do, they were doing one-handed push-ups. And yeah.
All right. And then what about just sort of the spit and polish part? Did you have to have the uniforms and equipment clean and all that kind of thing?
In perfect condition, and sometimes the expectations were just pretty unrealistic. You'd be out and be slugging through the mud in the regardless of the weather, it didn't make any difference. And you get back in and finally get into the bunk at midnight, something like that, and then you get be up at 3 a.m. and then have an inspection and have to have spit shine boots by 4 a.m. So
what did they do if you messed up?
Well, you could end up doing KP or more calisthenics and more push-ups, and you get singled out to do, that sort of thing.
Okay. And did you develop any understanding of why they were doing all this?
Oh, gee, I don't know that I had a real good feel for it at the time. I think after the fact, yeah, they wanted us to be a cohesive unit, basically, and toughen us up. For one of the things that kind of went without saying is that if you think it's tough here, wait till they're shooting at you out in the field, and then it's really going to be tough. So you've got to toughen up here.
Okay. Now you were there at a point sort of between wars. You go in '59, so you're doing a lot of the training early 1960 at this point. Were your instructors, some of them people who'd been in Korea, or do you think?
Yeah. Many had been in Korea, and Vietnam was right around the corner, and we were briefed on Vietnam and what was going on. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and it was a very likely chance that we would be going there.
Okay.
We were told that.
All right. How long was basic training?
8 weeks.
Okay. And after 8 weeks, what happens next?
Well, then I was assigned to my unit, and actually I was given a little bit of time off and could go home, and I think I got a few days and ended up going home, and then got assigned to my unit.
I guess it was normal to give people advanced training before putting them in a unit, but did you train just with the unit you were assigned to?
I trained with the unit that I was assigned to.
And what unit or type of unit were you assigned to?
It was a missile battalion, and I ended up going right to Arlington Heights. And so, yeah, I trained and was in the assembly site, and then also we did. But for 2 years, I went down to Red Sands, New Mexico 1 year, and McGregor Range, New Mexico another year, and that was part of the training too, where you actually fired the missiles and knocked down drones. And so we were pretty proud of ourselves because we had 100% batting average.
All right.
And then you did command cals too. And, the command cals, you would rehearse going through the firing because it was the real deal. I mean, the fact of the matter is we were told that the Russians could be flying in planes, and it was going to be our responsibility to knock them down before they killed everybody.
Okay, let's back up a little bit here. For people who don't know, where is Arlington Heights?
Just outside of Chicago.
Okay, and what kind of facility was there?
There was a large barracks, and then there was the whole battalion of missile sites, and there was some berms there too. And the large berms, for if you knew what it was about, you would recognize the berms. But if you didn't, they were just big mounds of dirt that were grass covered. Well, that would shield the surrounding area from the explosion if you were working in the assembly site and a warhead blew up and took out the fuel and oxidizer of the missile, and of course you at the same time. So that would protect the surrounding area from the blast.
Yeah, because you are in the Chicago suburbs. There's people around and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, Arlington Heights is as populous as then as it is now.
All right. And did you live on the base?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of facilities did they have there?
It was just a barracks, and there was a mess hall, and had a little theater. Actually, I ran the theater for a while. Talked me into doing that, and we had a pool hall, and it was pretty livable.
Okay. Now, what kinds of things did you learn to do? What was your actual job?
Well, I knew how to take a missile apart and put it together. I had some mechanical skills working with automobiles and motorcycles, and so I found it pretty easy to do that. So I would fuel and oxidize and warhead missiles, and I was taught that by the guys in the assembly site. And then I was also a member of the team that could fire them. And so I would do, in fact, I fractured my wrist one fine day when it was really icy outside, and we were going through a command cal. And so my job was to hook up the missiles and get them prepped to fire. And I just slipped and slammed both wrists against the missile launcher. I survived that, and it was not a big deal.
All right. So you did have your own variety of service-related injury then?
Yeah, but that never went anyplace.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think...
Yeah. There's no Purple Heart in a disability. Yeah.
No Purple Heart. Nothing ever recognizable.
All right. Now you're doing this kind of work in a period when there was a fair amount of tension in the Cold War. And you had, the Berlin Wall goes up in '61, and were you in Arlington Heights when that happened?
No, I think what happened was we went through a number of command cals and shot missiles twice down in New Mexico. And then it was not long after that when the Cold War escalated and decided that that whole technology was obsolete.
Okay.
And so I helped then take down those missile sites or deactivate the missiles at those sites. I wasn't part of any demolition, but I was part of the technical team that would pull the missiles apart and make them safe again for disposal.
Okay. And how many different places did you do that?
I want to say 4.
Okay.
4 different locations, I would commute to those locations in my car.
All right. So these were all kind of in the Chicago area?
Yeah, all in the Chicago area.
So they were Chicago's air defense system or something like it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that technology was becoming obsolete. Was it being replaced by something else?
Yeah, mutual destruction.
Okay.
That was I mean, if you just make a crater out of the United States and out of Russia, that was really the protection.
Okay. So you really had been anti-aircraft defense rather than anti-missile defense?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the whole technology that came along later that can take down missiles, we couldn't fly that fast. And we were doing Mach 3, and had cheapers, I can talk you through exactly how it all worked, but an entire trailer is what it took in order to just work with the acquisition radar, a whole damn trailer, and to predict the points of intercept and all that good stuff. And now you can do all of that in a video game. And my phone is more powerful than that.
Right. Okay. Now, so the things like the Berlin crisis, or then you had the Cuban Missile Crisis after that. Were you still in the Army when that happened? Because that's late '62.
No, I was out, and in fact, for what I was going through. So when I was active in missiles, it was like a couple of years, and that includes the time that I helped take down the sites around Chicago, and then I ended up going to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I was finally discharged.
Okay. And what did you do at Fort Sill?
I was in nuclear howitzers, 7-inch howitzers, and we shot them a lot down there that never shot nukes. But, you learn how to fire these great big things at 25-mile range. And in Fort Sill, you can have that kind of desert sitting out in front of you. You can shoot them that far.
All right. How did the countryside around Fort Sill compare with Fort Leonard Wood?
Oh, goodness. Fort Sill is mostly desert, and off in the distant hills you've got antelope that are cruising around if they don't get blown up by the howitzers. So see long distances. It was a lot like West Texas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a lot flatter. There's more hills and things around Leonard Wood.
Leonard Wood was forest.
Yeah.
Leonard Wood was really heavy forest.
That's southwest Missouri.
Yeah.
That area there. All right. Now, while you were in Illinois and you were working with the missile systems and so forth, did you go off base much?
I did. I had the freedom to go home pretty much every weekend, so it was not a real big commute to go from Arlington Heights to my home in Chicago. And so I would go visit, mom and dad and old friends, and pretty much every weekend.
Okay. All right. And then what was life like out at Fort Sill?
Fort Sill was not at all like that. I ended up being in the barracks, and going into Lawton, Oklahoma, which was, the closest big town. Every now and then, not real frequently. I didn't have a car, so was glad to get out after a year.
All right. Now, while you were there in Illinois, at that point, this is sort of before Vietnam heats up and before the anti-war movement gets up. Did people pay much attention to the fact that you were in the service, or did that not matter to anybody?
Didn't seem to. Well, there was still fallout from Korea, and there was a shooting going on in the world, and so there was the sense that you were in harm's way. It just wasn't a specific target at the time.
Yeah, but you yourself were not somebody that people treated badly because you were in the service.
No.
Yeah.
Never.
That kind of thing. Okay. Did the Army make much of an effort to get you to stay?
Yeah, they did. They were going to give me another stripe, and I think something over $1,000, which was a lot of money at the time. But I was convinced that I did my time and I wanted out, and I had other things I wanted to do with my life.
Okay. Now, if you think back across this time that you're in the Army there, are there particular incidents or things that kind of stand out in your memory that you haven't brought into the story here yet?
Yeah, when one of the guys that I went in with was killed, and it was an accident right by the Arlington Heights missile site, and he and a couple other guys was a terrible rainstorm, and they didn't have the appropriate blessings to bring their cars on site. There was several people, and somebody driving down the road couldn't see, and ran into three of the guys and killed all three of them at one time. And one of those guys was one of the guys that I went in the military with. So yes, I certainly remember that.
All right. And now, so when do you get out?
Well, in September of 1962, I was discharged, and because I had a secret, because of the missiles and because of the nuclear, I had a secret clearance. And so I found a job with Cook Electric, and doing technical drafting and design work, and ended up working on Apollo 1, the gyro system for Apollo 1, and that's so my security clearance kind of helped the way in making that happen.
Okay. Now, back in, you had not finished high school. Now, you mentioned you got a GED?
I went through the test and got a GED, and then started school at Kendall College in Evanston, and ended up getting an associate degree there.
All right.
And then went beyond that.
So when did you get the GED? Was that while you were still in the Army or after you got out?
Was right after I got out, just pretty much immediately after I got out.
All right. And then when did you start college?
As fast thereafter as I could. I don't remember the exact time, but I was working because I didn't have diddle for money, so I was working and going to school too, and managed to get in a couple of semesters. I squirreled away enough money to do a couple of semesters full time, and then finished off at nights.
Okay. But you stayed the whole time with your job, though.
I changed jobs.
Okay.
I worked at Cook Electric for a while, and then ended up going to several Alpha Engineering, probably more than any others, and but always with my eye on going to school and getting through. And I used the GI Bill too.
Okay. I'm just trying to fit the Apollo 1 program. I mean, that's the beginning of Apollo, using the Saturn V rockets and the 3-man well, become the moon missions
Mhm.
and so forth. And the original one was the one that burned on the launch pad.
Well, all I did was the gyro housing.
Mhm.
I did the gyro housing for Apollo 1. And I knew what it was. And you knew you're working in a very isolated environment, so you don't know a whole lot other than what's right in front of you.
You were still doing that back on the job in Illinois. You weren't going down to.
No, that was
Gabriel
that was back in Illinois. That was through Cook Electric at the time.
Okay.
Back in Illinois.
All right. So basically, you kind of stayed in engineering after that, or?
I did, and I got some technical. I went on after Kendall College to Elmhurst College and got enough technical courses, and ended up getting some other degrees as well. One in English literature and another in psychology. So, got to be a pretty educated guy after being a high school dropout.
Okay, so why did you take a degree in English literature?
It was very interesting. It was just extremely interesting, as was psychology. And I found that what I was able to, I had two drives, really. One of the drives was what I really enjoyed and what I got a kick out of, and the other one was what I could make money at.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to be able to make some money too. So those were the two avenues that I pursued academically.
Yeah, I take it the English literature wasn't going to make you a lot of money.
No, neither was the psychology. I discovered that right off the bat. You couldn't make a damn cent.
All right. And of course, we are here at the Milwaukee Irish Festival. So what brings you here?
Married an Irish girl. Sharon Kelly is as Irish as they can get. And grew to really love the Irish music. And of course, this is the best festival in the world that way. And so we've come up right along for a number of years, and just absolutely won't miss it. Up here on a boat with my friend here.
Mm-hmm.
We have been doing this together for a while now.
All right. So to kind of look back over your time in the service, what do you think you kind of took out of that, or how did it affect you?
I grew up. I went in a 17-year-old kid. I came out still a 20-year-old kid, but I was one hell of a lot smarter, and I knew what the haves and have-nots of the world, and you had to have an education if you wanted to be a have. I sure as hell learned that.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story, so I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share it today.
Okay, very
All
good.
right.